Alrighty, so I thought I would spend a couple of minutes talking about the state of Last Epoch, which is a game that I've been quite interested in and I've enjoyed some of my time playing it. I've posted a couple of videos about it. I do have a vested interest in seeing the game have some success, but at the same time, I have seen some warning signs that I just kind of feel like cannot be ignored. So I thought I would go ahead and just spend a few random minutes talking about it. Now, I've not written a script for this, so this is kind of off the cuff, and it's just going to kind of be my brainstorming on some of these things. I apologize in advance if it's going to kind of ramble on a little bit, and quite frankly, I don't know that very many of you will be interested in it, but I think some of you might be. So in any case, I'm going to go ahead and organize my thoughts here and throw them up into a video in case it can actually be of some service to somebody. So first of all, let me just say that I don't really like making negative videos. Really, the first successful video that I ever posted was the Warhammer 3 is better than you think video. And I think that there's a lot of people who appreciated sort of a positive video in the context of all the negative publicity that Warhammer 3 was getting at the time. And I don't think it was unwarranted positivity. These are games, after all. And if a game is fun, then, we probably shouldn't get hung up on some of the little things that, that we wish could be different. And I think sometimes as gamers, it's a little bit too easy for us to get hung up on those things. So again, if a game is fun, by all means play it. I do. In many ways, Last Epoch is a fun game, and I think in many ways it does have the potential to be great. As far as the bugs and the concerns and the design and things, well, we all have different thresholds for the amount of bugs that we're willing to put up with, the amount of design problems, or let's just say disagreements with how something is designed that we are willing to tolerate and still have fun. And since we all have different thresholds, there's clearly going to always be some people who are sort of like me and are more bug averse, and others who are just perfectly okay with it. And that's fine as well. Clearly, a lot of people are still enjoying Last Epoch, and I think that's good. They paid money for it, so by all means, they should continue to enjoy it. Now, a few weeks ago, just before the 1.0 launch, I did make a video that I talked about what I thought they needed to improve to make the game a best-in-genre type of a game, because I do think that potential is there. And I think it's safe at this point to say that not only were those deficiencies not addressed, in some cases they've gotten worse. And that is a little bit unfortunate. It's a little bit painful for me to have to say that, but here we are. And then on top of some of those deficiencies that I mentioned in that video, I think that there are some new ones that I never would have imagined happening. And I think the sort of the debacle of the last week or so has kind of shown this. So I'm just going to go ahead and make a prediction here. I think that the game is doomed. Now, what I mean by doomed is that I think it will forever be plagued by constant problems and mismanagement. I'm not predicting that there's going to be bankruptcy for EHG or the complete abandonment of the player base. I think there will always probably, or I shouldn't say always, but for the foreseeable future, there'll be a fair number of players who stick with the game. But I think that number will dwindle as more and more of them go back to the other ARPGs. And so I think we've already seen sort of the heyday of Last Epoch, and I think that unless I'm wrong or unless something substantively changes, then I think you're likely to never quite see the player numbers that we saw at the launch. So I did think about saying it's doomed unless EHG changes course on their approach, but I'm not going to say that. I'm just going to say that I think the game is doomed, period, end of sentence, because I don't see any signs that they are actually capable of doing so. And of course, this is an outsider's opinion, and I'm certainly open to being proven wrong. In fact, I hope to be proven wrong, but it's not a wholly uninformed opinion that I have here. I did work in IT for a decade as a developer, as an analyst, as a designer, and then as a manager. And in almost all of that time, for all that time, I did support various systems. And of course, that's where my opinion is coming from. I've been informed by the importance of providing good support for the systems that my company was responsible for. So this debacle since the launch has thrown up so many red flags that I think it would be silly to ignore all of them. So I think we're going to have to talk about them just a little bit. So first of all, obviously, the first one right out of the gate was the server problems. I think those have been talked about enough. It's a bad sign that they weren't able to provide not only obviously more stability with their servers from launch. Obviously their claim was that they just far exceeded their expectations. One wonders how that's possible. But obviously they're not the first company to have a bad launch when it comes to stability. So and I think it's been talked about enough, so I'm not going to spend any more time talking about the server problems. But what I am going to move on to are sort of the things that bother me more. I think the magnitude of new bugs that have been introduced with each patch. I shouldn't say with each patch. I should say there have been patches, and those patches have introduced new bugs, and some of them have been quite severe. I don't want to go back through and determine that there was, in fact, at least one significant bug with every new patch, but you know what I'm saying, hopefully. So anyway, I think that the magnitude of these new bugs that are introduced with patches that are supposed to be fixing other bugs reflects a bad QA methodology. For anybody who's not familiar, QA is quality assurance. And so that's obviously a concern. If they're not catching their own bugs in testing, okay, that's one red flag right there. Then let's take a step further and say the comments that have been made recently about, let's call it their philosophy of how they want to address bugs. So the expressed philosophy of only fixing bugs that impact performance it's unacceptable. It's just not tolerable. In fact, this is really the thing that probably more than anything else has kind of made me completely discouraged with them. I've never heard of such a thing. So bugs are bad. Yeah, obviously they need to be prioritized, and the worst ones have to get addressed first. But to ignore bugs, yeah, that's a bad look. So, and also incidentally, the survey that they put out to then solicit feedback, that survey has so many problems with it that they can't possibly draw meaningful conclusions from it. It was a flawed survey from the moment that they launched it, and then they made changes to it. So I'm not going to get into it because that's kind of boring to talk about how a survey could be so flawed, but it was. And it almost seemed to me like they were doing it to provide cover for the decision that they had already made to not address a lot of their bugs. And so then on top of that, there are so many little things in the game that remain unpolished. Many of the things that I mentioned in previous videos. But anyway, they remain unpolished. So one basically has to presume that they're prioritized so low that they'll likely never be improved. Now, some of these things are not going to be all that important to many people. I get that story is not that big of a deal for probably the majority of ARPG players. I get that. There are other things besides story that I think are quite unpolished in the game. But again, like I mentioned earlier, we all have different thresholds for what we're willing to tolerate. But what I do want to talk about are, let's focus on two areas, the two B's, bugs and balance. So I already touched a little bit on bugs. Bugs need to be fixed, and according to a priority, certainly. But coming right out and saying that you're not going to fix some is really a warning sign of things to come. That's not really the philosophy that you want to see from a support team. And put simply, The combination of a development cycle that creates bugs, a QA methodology that doesn't catch those bugs, and a support philosophy that ignores those bugs can only lead to disaster. And so this is what I mean about if something doesn't change, this is only going to get worse, I'm afraid. So let's move on to balance, I guess. So balance is vital, obviously, in an ARPG or really any kind of RPG. If you've got, a choice between different skills that a player can take to make their character unique, but those choices aren't really, they're rather obvious which ones you have to pick in order to be a strong character versus a weaker character, then, the balance gets messed up. And of course, many players just want to follow a build guide and have fun playing the meta builds, and that's fine. But there are always lots of players, namely the ones who create those build guides. There's always lots of players who enjoy, the creative side of messing around. So let's talk about exploits a little bit. So there's always lots of players who enjoy exploits, just like, following a meta guide, a meta build guide. There's going to be players who enjoy using the exploits to feel powerful. That's fine. This game is extremely likely to continuously provide an endless stream of exploits for them to enjoy. But the flip side to that is that the balance gets further broken, the build craft becomes pointless, and the creative players that we mentioned a second ago who want to mess around and, try to turn their theory into reality and test out different ideas, they're just going to get more and more frustrated because of the broken balance. So my prediction is that they'll move on, or maybe I shouldn't say move on, I should maybe say move back to other games like Path of Exile and Grim Dawn. Those are the ones I'm familiar with, but there's other ARPGs out there as well, where, you can kind of use your creative imagination a little bit better than what's available right now in Last Epoch, as long as these bugs and balance problems and exploits continue to exist. So where does that leave Last Epoch? Well, as I said, I think it has the potential to be great. I just don't think that will ever be realized. I think that 11th Hour Games is a team of extremely talented people who lack an experienced leader or some type of proper vision to make this project succeed in all the ways that it needs to. I hope that they find such a person. I hope that they recognize that they need such a person. Having said that, I hope that they do prove me wrong. It's still the early days. Maybe they've just had their hands full. Maybe this is an overreaction on my part, and I'm certainly open to that possibility. And in fact, I'm hoping for that possibility. I've enjoyed test driving Last Epoch for a while, and I'll probably check back in periodically to see how it's doing. And of course, as I mentioned, nothing would make me happier than having to eat my words. I will happily post an apology to them for whatever that's worth. I'm such a small channel. I'm sure they'll never even notice this video. But if they do right the ship, I will happily eat crow and post an apology. However, I think for now, I personally am a little bit fed up with what I have seen. I shouldn't say fed up. That's a little bit too negative, but I'm just, I'm discouraged by what I've seen. And there are other games that, quite frankly, at this point, I think are a better use of my time. So I think I'm probably out for now on Last Epoch. But like I said, I will check in periodically and see if things have improved down the road. So anyway, welcome your feedback. I'm certainly open to criticism. I'm quite sure, in fact, that a lot of people will disagree with this. It's obviously going to be a very controversial topic, and that's fine. I feel, I feel like I've provided my justification for why I have all of these concerns about the future of Last Epoch. But anyway, certainly we can have a discussion. Just try to keep it civil. And as always, I do welcome those comments and feedback as well as I very much appreciate all of you watching, or in this case, listening. And I will see you all in the next video.